Hello, chess friends. This is International Master Valeri Lilov, and today I'm going to talk to you about the idea behind traps, how they're created, why they're so important, and more importantly, more valuable, how you can make sure you could take advantage of these in your own games, how you could set them up, and make sure they're great. We're going to start with one of the oldest, the so-called Lasker trap. It basically goes in one of the most exciting openings, the counter gambit of Albin, basically starting with the moves d4, d5, c4, e5. Now, as you can see, black is actually sacrificing a pawn in order to get the initiative, and it is a fairly exciting sacrifice. We're giving up a pawn with the idea to get some extra control in the center and draw some awesome possibilities. So what is white supposed to do? Well, actually, as we play with the move e5, he's supposed to do something with the d4 pawn. Now, basically speaking, he has to take. So taking the c takes to the d may work too, but then black is just going to do queen takes to the d5, challenge the d4, and that's probably not, one of the best things. So the better opportunity for white could be the move of d takes to the e4. The idea behind it is to make sure that he wins the pawn, and he could further develop this way. So what goes if white plays with the move of d takes to the e5? After the move of d takes to the e5, essentially black's major goal is to play d4. Now that pawn on the d4 takes away quite a bit of space from white. And this is why black is mainly doing it. He's sacrificing the pawn in order to get a lot more space, a lot more squares, and it works. So what about white? Well, let's take a look. I mean, one of white's options, we could say the major options, is that he could continue with knight f3. And knight f3 is supposed to be the right way to go. I mean, he's going to set up the knight. He will be attacking against the pawn in the middle. Black should most likely support it by moving, let's say, with knight to the c6. And yes, things are going nice. So here, knight c6, white plays g3, and then black could actually consider doing a move like knight e7 or bishop g4, and the position is supposed to be pretty decent for each side. Now, the really interesting part is what happens when white doesn't. He plays e3. See, the best way to set up a trap is when you make it look natural, what I often call the natural looking trap. What natural trap means is that you're allowing your opponent to play a good looking move. At the same time, you continue your development. So even when he plays good, or if he chooses the good move, ultimately, your game is going to be good. But at the same time, you're setting up an actual trap. A little bit of a trap that he could very quickly choose and get a pawn. So for instance, we could see the move e3 played here. So if white plays e3, basically black just jumps in with bishop b4. And so this is really a very interesting way, seeing how, traps don't have any real logic, because you have to know that they're all mostly circumstantial. That means that a trap exists because of a particular flaw in someone's position. Now, there is no principle to recognize what that flaw is. This is why a lot of the traps are actually hidden, because, people don't really notice that there's something wrong going on with the position until it's too late. Yet, after the move of bishop to the b4, we realize the effects of that. Black could just capture the pawn on e3, attacking the bishop, coming up with a pretty serious, pretty severe, we could say, a threat against both the d2 and f2, and the impact is huge. Actually, after d takes to the e3, we realize that if white chooses to pick up the bishop, that's one of the best, probably the best ways, the best looking moves that he could choose. This is going to be perfect for black, as he could do the move of e takes f. And we realize now the danger. After e takes f, now of course white can't take, because if he does get to take, we're going to take the d1 queen, and if he plays with the move of king to the e2, there is f takes the g1, this promotion of a knight with an actual check. It's brilliant. White has, just a few moves. Most of them really don't matter as much. So he's got to take most likely. And then as he captures, rook takes the g1, then we have bishop g4 check. Of course, there is the possibility for the king to go back to the e1 in order for him to try and escape the danger. That's also an option. But it's not really going to make any major difference. This type of move is just going to help black. How exactly? Well, in a couple of different ways. I'd say that probably the more important variation is going to be if black simply jumps in forward. So he could do a move like queen to the h4, really strong, really dangerous move, catching white completely off guard. His king is horrible on the e1, so black starts with a beautiful check. Essentially, white's got to do the move of g3, but then there's queen e4 check. So if he plays with king to the d2, trying to escape a little more, this is going to mean that black's got knight c6. Solid attack. Now we have bishop g4. We got rook to the... And you could see that the whole trap really was based on the fact that white is completely undeveloped and backward, so just basically it all becomes possible because of the low development and preparation of white. Essentially, it is black who does all this challenge, all that danger, and with a move like knight to the c6 and all of this, it's becoming really incredible. What about white? I mean, can he do anything? Not so much, not really, especially with the move of bishop to g4 taking place, and a rook to the d8 or alongside castling. It's just a matter of a couple of moves before it all gets really, really difficult for him and impossible to play. What I love about such kinds of positions is the threats. You see, you really need to be thinking about that. How do you get to create a threat, and maintain that type of momentum? It's wonderful. What we get to see is that if white plays bishop c3, okay, there's going to be a bishop to the g4, alongside castles is practically inevitable as a tactic. And, white can't do much. It's not after the move of alongside castling, not after the rook reaches the d8. A little trap, but very effective, incredibly powerful, and great. It's actually from the very beginning, this becomes impossible to defend. So let's talk about another kind of a trap that is important to know and realize. So what is it? The next one is called the Hallows trap, and it is a fairly interesting trap line that exists within a very, weird opening. So what am I talking about? Basically, after the moves of d4, d5, knight, pawn to e4, d takes to d, we have the Blackmer-Dimmer gambit. So the Blackmer-Dimmer gambit, an excellent opening system. Basically, the idea is that white's giving up a pawn with the goal to simply focus on playing knight c3, countering the pawn, then f3, exchange, and queen takes f3. Now, what's so interesting about this is that right after the move of queen takes f3, white's getting ready to develop the pieces. He can actually move out the bishops. He could get down the knight, but in reality, what he's really going for is a way to open his pieces. The sacrifice isn't as important because it's really all about how do you get to open up those forces. If you can open them in a good way in time, everything's going to be great, and that's exactly what white is doing in this position. It's beautiful. So where does black go after that? Well, black plays queen takes d4. Now this is actually in a way the trap. We're giving him the chance to win that pawn on the d4, to make something pretty nice. But then as he does it, ultimately, he loses all the right possibilities. He loses all the initiative. And that is more than enough for white. So what should white play with? Bishop e3, of course, a pretty strong threat coming up very quickly. Black moves his queen down on the b4. And then white is actually able to respond with a simple castling. He is getting ready, whether it's going to be about moves of knight at the b5, or it's going to be about, the light square bishop being played out. It doesn't matter as much. So the important thing is that white is certainly going up for the attack. It's a beautiful thing. So it's going to be a great development, and it works as a charm. So what does black play, actually? Well, he picked up to do the move of bishop to the g4, and this is the time where white is playing with knight b5. If you look at this, in this particular way, you realize the power. Every piece that white is using is actually creating an attack. It's like now there's a knight takes to the c7 attack. We have queen takes to the b7, and the black king is flying with different sort of checkmating threats that are more important than anything else. And it's quite bad. It's really, really difficult. Bishop takes f3 also seems to be losing. So what about black? Can he do anything to stop this? Well, it's very difficult. That's the problem. You see, like just because of the different sets of threats that white is creating, the only thing that black is left with are problems. Maybe you could play with knight a6, and this is what like a trap is supposed to do. It's supposed to trap your opponent in that really bad sequence of defending, on having to protect against every move, and it's just very difficult to do it. So maybe you can try with a move like knight to the a6 as he does, and that's where white can play queen takes to the b7, hitting both the a8 and a6. The black king is in the middle, so that's actually very painful. He plays queen e4, and queen takes to a6 wins the piece, leaving black behind with his king in a really bad position, and the rest of his piece is just all over the place. Really, that's bad. Think about this. In most times, the whole idea is that you want to sacrifice something just so that we can get the possibility to pressure. So it's like white does it beautiful. There's nothing the black can continue with. And after queen takes d3, king b1. Now, not every sacrifice is going to be completely winning. Remember that. Not every sacrifice is going to have that, one great, winning, wonderful possibility in itself, like in here. But if you get the pressure that's out there and you have the wonderful possibility to continue with it, that's more than enough. This is really what we're looking for in this moment. So white's able to play it. King b1, queen c5, knight f3. Now black is totally tied down. All of his pieces are unable to come back or come forward in any way. So it's a very difficult type of position. With his king on the e8, with threats like queen to the b7 to be played, and with so much more, this is just a disaster. Very important, but a disaster actually, that black cannot endure. Very strong. One of the keys of setting up a trap is to discover a weakness. Now, you don't always have it. That's why I said that sometimes it's hidden. But like in this particular example, the thing that black didn't realize, he didn't see the threats coming because he didn't realize that the weakness was the king. So look for something major. Even if that doesn't mean that you can attack it right now, you could think of preparing your pieces or setting them up closer so that they could be in the condition to attack eventually. And when it happened, it was great. So I want to show you another interesting trap. This is the so-called Monty trap. Now, what is this all about? Let's take a look. We'll see. Basically, white starts this with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, bishop b4, check. Nothing special so far. Basically, black is developing in a kind of standard manner. He's basically getting ready to castle short and develop his pieces more actively. This is the time where white plays bishop to the d2, bishop takes to the d2, queen takes to the d2. So yes, the development works perfect. White's getting ready. So what is going on in this position? Well, black played b6 and white plays g3. Bishop to the b7, bishop to the g2. Castles, knight c3. Now, you wouldn't really expect to see a trap in a position of that kind. And why is that? Well, I'm actually saying this because truth is that after the move of knight of the c3 is being played out, ultimately the idea is that now white is getting the control over the e4 square. He's got a lot of extra space, good possibilities. So step by step, things start to look pretty good. So what is going on now? Well, actually, after the move of knight to the c3, black played the move of knight e4, and now white plays queen c2. See, this is the trap, provoking the opponent to actually start advancing way too early. So what we see is black started way too early. He didn't have any real preparation, anything that this could have actually given him, and yet he's making this, happen. Now, that's a really bad idea. You see, sometimes it's okay to open up and attack early, especially in towards the middle. But in most times, it is really not that much of a great idea, and so that's what makes it so good for white. And ultimately, that was the idea. So after the move of queen to the c2, black plays knight x to the c3, and surely the whole thinking is that now white plays with the move of knight to the g5. There's a nice threat against the h7. There is a threat against the b7, and black is actually going to lose. He doesn't get to do too much in this position. The big thing, oftentimes lies within your possibility to see what is weak for the opponent. What are the actual weaknesses or the major vulnerabilities? And then we realize this. It was h7 and b7. It was actually the fact that white can attack against all of these pretty quickly. And yes. Now, does that cause the trap? No. Often the cause of the trap is the bad development, or the fact that someone doesn't actually have what it takes in order to bring over his pieces in time and in good ways. So that's the major issue in this case. And so, for example, after that type of a move, then knight e4, and ultimately white plays with bishop takes to the e4, bishop takes to the e4, queen takes to the e4. So we have this threat against both h7 and a7, and so it's pretty much a powerful possibility. It's interesting to see how that whole thing really works out for white, and that the key for white is let's make threats, because black has already opened up quite a few weaknesses. With the h7 as an actual weakness, with the other things that he's got to worry, that gives white plenty of different possibilities. So most of these traps happen because of a hidden weakness inside the opponent's position. But what you really have to do, what I really recommend you to do, is look carefully. Think about what could be the different ways you could use to exploit that weakness. Or, eventually, the idea of like setting up a couple of pieces. Usually that's the most important thing. Setting up a couple of pieces so that, they can both work together and create the necessary challenge or damage against the opponent. This is all we have to keep in mind.